In Can You Feel This?, the emotional landscape of McKinsey Collins' journey unfolds like an unguarded confession, each frame peeling back a layer of her emotional armor until what remains is not the neat redemption of a protagonist, but the raw becoming of a woman trying to exist truthfully in her own body. The story situates itself in a liminal space, somewhere between therapy and self-discovery, between gender questioning and emotional repression, between the deep ache of isolation and the fleeting, terrifying possibility of connection. From the very first moments we see McKinsey, her quiet stillness across from her therapist, her reluctance to name what she feels, there is an immediate recognition, for many queer women, the sense of being asked to define yourself before you even know what safety feels like. The therapy room becomes the crucible of her transformation, a mirror in which she must learn not only to recognize her reflection, but to believe that her reflection deserves to exist. She is not the loud or flamboyant version of queerness that media often privileges. She is hesitant, withdrawn, visibly uncertain, and that in itself is a radical portrayal. For so many LGBTQ+ women, self-knowledge comes not as a triumphant revelation, but as a series of small, painful acknowledgments. The first time you realize you're staring at someone a second too long. The first time you say the word she with affection and fear mingling in your throat. The first time you admit that what the world taught you about being a woman never quite fit. McKinsey embodies all of that confusion with aching precision. Her exchanges with the therapist are not just dialogue, but invitations into the interior space of a woman whose mind has learned to protect itself through detachment. When asked what she felt during the altercation that landed her in therapy, her answer, nothing, absolutely nothing, is not emptiness but survival. For women, and particularly for queer women, numbness often functions as a shield. When the world punishes you for feeling too much or feeling the wrong things, you learn to shut it off to stay alive. As the narrative moves from that sterile safety into McKinsey's everyday life, bars, gyms, fleeting social interactions, the film expands the metaphor of her healing into the physical world. She meets women who stir curiosity and fear in equal measure. The flirtations, the awkward pauses, the shy glances are never filmed as spectacle but as sacred exchanges, moments when one woman dares to see another and in doing so, holds up a mirror to parts of herself she has long buried. When McKinsey encounters the woman who casually asks whether she goes by Mac or McKinsey, it's more than small talk. It's the first time someone names her without assumption, leaving space for her to claim her identity. For queer audiences, this moment feels quietly monumental because naming is power. It's the first step in undoing years of misnaming, misunderstanding, and invisibility. Her conversation about gender and embodiment, "I've thought about what it would be like to have a dick. I don't think there's one prescribed way of being a woman," is not provocation, it's liberation spoken aloud. Many queer women and transmasculine individuals recognize the delicate balance between rejecting prescribed femininity and still being forced to perform it for the world's comfort. McKinsey's words echo the lived experience of so many who have had to question whether their gender expression, their desire, or their body disqualifies them from womanhood. The film's power lies in refusing to answer that question for her. It allows her uncertainty to breathe, which is rare and necessary in queer cinema that often demands resolution to validate identity. The connection between McKinsey and Kate deepens this exploration, not as an idealized romance, but as a study in emotional risk. Their chemistry is grounded not in seduction, but in recognition, the quiet, cautious recognition of someone who might understand you before you do. Kate represents both possibility and danger, the possibility of being known and the danger of losing the fragile stability McKinsey has built to survive. Their dynamic captures something fundamental about queer relationships between women, the way attraction and empathy often intertwine, the way intimacy can feel both healing and destabilizing. When McKinsey admits she doesn't feel present during intimacy, when she says no one can make her climax except herself, it isn't a comment on mechanics, it's a revelation of disconnection. So many women, queer or not, understand the loneliness of going through the motions of connection, without ever feeling safe enough to surrender. For queer women, that feeling is often compounded by years of hiding, of internalized shame, of not being given the language or permission to explore desire on their own terms. The film doesn't sexualize this struggle, it humanizes it. The tenderness between McKinsey and Kate, their moments of hesitation and courage, speak to a generation of queer viewers who crave representation that doesn't just validate their attraction but validates their complexity. The gym and therapy sequences work in parallel to show how McKinsey externalizes her pain. Each punch thrown, each rep completed, becomes a metaphor for the discipline of survival, the body hardening to protect what the heart cannot yet process. The act of movement becomes both punishment and prayer, a way of proving that she can still feel something, even if it's only exhaustion. Yet beneath that toughness lies fragility, and Kate's presence begins to soften it. The film's most moving scenes are not the moments of physical closeness, but the moments of emotional near contact. The almost confessions, the glances that hover on the edge of tears, the pauses that linger a second too long. These are the emotional gestures queer women recognize as their own, the silent language of those who have had to love carefully. For women in general, McKinsey's struggle resonates as the universal longing to be seen without being reduced, to be touched emotionally without fear of being consumed. What makes Can You Feel This particularly poignant is how it addresses society's discomfort with women expressing love for one another. Even now, depictions of female intimacy are often filtered through heteronormative lenses, either fetishized or sanitized. This film refuses both. It neither turns their connection into a spectacle nor erases its erotic charge. Instead, it treats desire as an extension of emotional truth, a natural evolution of trust. Society's unease persists because love between women disrupts the patriarchal order that defines women through men. When two women love each other, they remove the male gaze from the equation and build an ecosystem of care that doesn't rely on domination or validation. That autonomy threatens structures built on women's dependency, and Can You Feel This confronts that by centering two women who choose each other, even when the world tells them they shouldn't. The discomfort also arises from visibility. Queer women living openly challenge the myth that queerness is peripheral or rare. McKinsey's mere existence as a woman exploring her identity outside prescribed boundaries becomes an act of resistance. Symbolically, McKinsey and Kate represent two ends of the queer spectrum of self-knowledge, one still learning to name her truth, the other embodying a more comfortable ambiguity. Their relationship mirrors the real-world tension between discovery and acceptance, between fear of judgment and hunger for authenticity. McKinsey's fear of losing control, her habit of withdrawing, her question about whether she's a top or bottom, are less about labels than about ownership. Who gets to define her? In contrast, Kate's ease becomes both invitation and mirror. She shows McKinsey what self-acceptance could look like, without demanding she hurry to get there. Their dance around each other reflects how queer love often unfolds in layers, not declarations, how safety is built slowly, sometimes wordlessly. For women watching, especially those still grappling with repression or the residue of shame, their interaction models a radical kind of patience. It says, "You are allowed to arrive late to your own truth." The film also confronts internalized homophobia and the subtle ways women are taught to police their own desires. McKinsey's hesitations, the instinct to apologize, to minimize, to question whether her feelings are valid, mirror the experience of countless queer women conditioned to believe their love must be justified or hidden. By showing her journey without melodrama, the film normalizes that process of unlearning. When she allows herself to be vulnerable in therapy, when she admits to Kate that she's scared of connection, she begins to dismantle the armor that once protected her. This vulnerability becomes political. For women, especially those marginalized by both gender and sexuality, to be vulnerable in public, to speak about their bodies and desires without shame, is a revolutionary act. The film's title, Can You Feel This, becomes a challenge to the audience as much as a question between the characters. Can you feel this? The weight of repression, the courage it takes to be honest, the tenderness that society still misunderstands as weakness? In its final stretch, without spoiling plot details, the film suggests that healing is not linear. McKinsey's progress is jagged, her breakthroughs punctuated by setbacks. This realism is its greatest strength. It refuses to offer cathartic closure because real-life identity work rarely provides it. For queer viewers, this honesty feels protective. It tells us that we don't have to have everything figured out to be valid. For women of all orientations, it speaks to the truth that wholeness is a process, not a destination. The cinematography reinforces this intimacy. Soft lighting, close-up frames, the lingering of the camera on hands, breath, and stillness. These choices echo the interiority of female experience. Our worlds are built on detail, nuance, the unsaid.